Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Before we begin the webinar, which will discuss and highlight the integration between Proofpoint and Okta, I have a handful of slides to help me set the scene of who Bytes are and what our capabilities are. Now, before we go on to that, we do have just a little bit of housekeeping to go through. So just for your information, during the webinar, you will be muted. However, you can submit any questions through the box on the right-hand side of your screen. There will also be a Q&A at the end of the session to answer any submitted questions, and the webinar recording will be made available to you after the session. Now, what can we expect today? I will take us through who Bytes are and our areas of expertise. I will then hand over to excuse me, my colleague James Richmond from Okta and Ed Rowley from Proofpoint, who will then go into the in-depths between the integrations of the two solutions. So, who are we? In a nutshell, we handpick the best technologies on the market and develop relationships with those vendors to ensure that we can offer the best possible proposition based on your requirements, as well as the best possible commercial price for you as well. Behind the account management team, we have experts such as myself who support them in their questioning and engagements with you, the end users, directly. Bytes have dedicated experts in all headings you can see on the screen. If any areas are piquing your interest, please contact your account manager, who will be able to liaise with the appropriate team and provide you with any services that you require. Now, for our last slide, I will be highlighting our security practice. Now, as you can see on the screen, outside of our partnerships with an array of security vendors, which a select few accreditations are highlighted on the bottom left, Bytes is able to offer expertise in other areas. I will pick on the cyber consulting division to demonstrate this. Our CISO, Steve Marshall, and his team offer many services, including pen testing and incident response, to go with or separately from the procurement of licenses. Now, there is plenty of information here on the screen. If any areas are piquing your interest, please do contact your account manager and they will be able to connect you with the ideal member of our Bytes team. So, onto the webinar, in which we'll be discussing the integrations between Proofpoint and Okta and what that means for you from a security standpoint. And on that note, I will hand over to my colleagues, James Richmond and Ed Rowley.
Good morning, everyone. So thank you for that, Christian. I think we've just got a couple of things just to go through at the very beginning. So first of all, what we'll be taking you through today. So let's go through first who we actually are before we do that. To introduce myself, I am James Richmond. I am an Alliances Solutions Engineer here at Okta, and I'm here to support all of our partners and our customers across the UK. And I'll pass over to Ed.
Thanks, James. Good morning, everybody. Thank you to the team at Bytes for organising this. My name is Ed Rowley. I'm Director of Technical Sales at Proofpoint, and I've put on a lot more weight during lockdown than that picture suggests.
Thank you, Ed. So just to take you through what we will be covering today, we've got a number of different things on the agenda, the first of which will be taking you through the relevant trends of phishing, the security attacks, particularly over the last year. We'll then be delving into how Okta and Proofpoint can work together to provide that ultimate solution and safeguard your organizations. Then we'll be looking at how we can actually show you that integration. So we take you through a couple of demonstrations around how those integrations can work, the information that can be collected via Proofpoint, how that can be fed into Okta, and ultimately how Okta can work with your identities to protect them based on the information that's being collected via Proofpoint. And then finally, we'll be finishing up with any questions that anybody may have. So if there's any questions at any time, as Christian mentioned earlier, do pop those in the Q&A box or the questions box, and we'll look to answer those at the end of the webinar. So without further ado, I'll pass over to Ed, who's going to be covering off the first section.
Thanks, James. First of all, we're going to have a quick look at some of the relevant trends, set the scenes. Most of you will know a lot of this, but it's always useful to just to look back on some of what we're seeing in the threat landscape. Firstly, you will see this day in, day out, but phishing messages get through. They're a real pain. The criminal gangs are out there sending them out all the time. And according to some research from Avon in their global phish report, 25% of phishing emails are getting through the default Office security. Now, there's a good reason for that. And one of those is the success of Office 365. It's ubiquitous, it's easy to use, and people are using it, but it's also easy for criminals to get their hands on. And if you can think of the Office 365 default security as being the benchmark for securities for the criminal gangs to test their phishing attacks against, I think that's a fair statement, and that's the reason why so many of these messages are getting through. They're also using a lot of the Microsoft infrastructure, as we'll see later on in the demo, as part of their phishing campaigns, the techniques that they use to get these messages into people's inboxes. Many of these attacks are using stolen credentials. The phishing will lead to credentials being stolen and then having an abuse of those privileges, which will then result in an action taking place that can result in a significant loss of money to an organization. According to the data breach study by the Ponemon Institute, the average cost of a breach for slightly larger organizations is nearly $4 million. That's the average. For an organization with no automation as part of a clear up, it's quite a lot higher than that, getting closer to $4.5 million. However, where there is automation, if you've actually got tools in place to take action once a phishing compromise has taken place, you can reduce by 1.5 million more than the cost of that breach, certainly in those larger size organizations. Good move on. Thank you. He's one step ahead as always. There's a big reason why phishing is so successful. Okay, we see that the vast majority of data breaches are as a result of credential theft, usually as a result of a phishing campaign. There's been a massive growth in phishing. We've seen a 300% increase in phishing attacks over the past couple of years, and it's the primary way that attackers are getting the credentials that they use to successfully perpetrate a data breach. And we've seen this FBI report number peddled out lots and lots of times. It's huge. It's it really is a significant amount, and that's just the amount that is reported. Okay, it's the real number is probably vastly more than that. And as a result of the threat, the risk that this poses to business, and the cost as a result of the potential risk, it has become a board level concern. This is something that has reached the C-level, and if it hasn't, it really should be. They're talking to the wrong people. These organizations need to spend some more time speaking with Bytes to understand how serious it is. But what we can really see is that identity is the new perimeter. As organizations, and this has never been more the case than since the COVID outbreak, when people have been scattered to the wind, having to work remotely, where organizations' information has left the corporate network and is now being stored in the cloud, being accessed by individuals outside the corporate network, possibly not on corporate infrastructure. Their identity is the new perimeter. And as a result of that, their identities and their credentials that protect those identities have never been more valuable. Criminals are no longer able to use vulnerabilities, really, to access that data. In the past, they would look at the infrastructure, identify a vulnerability, and attack that vulnerability. The new vulnerability is with individuals via social engineering. People's emotions are their vulnerabilities. Now, that might be just that the people are tired or very busy, but we will see threats exploiting individuals via social engineering. And of course, the vast majority of these threats are coming in via email, because that's what people expect to work with. It's a medium that people are using day in, day out, and expect messages to come in on. So clicks happen all the time. As an example, here are some of the really high-profile compromises that have been based on email and credential-based attacks in the past few years. In cybersecurity terms, these are almost like dinosaurs because they're several years old now. Back in 2014, eBay was hacked when employees' credentials were compromised, losing over 140 million accounts. And of course, these accounts are then shared across the dark net and used to perpetrate further compromise. Uber, 57 million users impacted their customer base. The AWS credentials were compromised and the information was posted publicly on GitHub, out there on the dark web, well actually on the public web really, for people to take and use. And then RSA, significant because RSA was a security company itself, and again, successfully phished, compromised by state-sponsored actors. Now, these are high-profile organizations who will have taken security very, very seriously. And it's important to remember that although these are flagship ones that make the news, this is happening to organizations of all sizes on a daily basis. And it's something that we believe we can help reduce the impact of through this partnership that we're talking about today. Just looking a bit more closely into a phishing attack, here's a simple attack chain that can lead to quite a significant breach. An email comes into a user. The user might think they're expecting it. It might have been put together very well as a result of research that the criminal gangs have used, especially if it's a very targeted attack, or it might just be a random one saying that your Amazon parcel's on its way. Click here for more information. So the user clicks on the malicious URL in an inbox and potentially gives up their credentials in there. Alternatively, a user may forward that email on to other people within the organization, and someone else might click on it and become compromised. If at stage one, the user clicks on that link, gives up their credentials, and has their account compromised, once compromised, that user may, the criminals using the compromised account may forward that message on internally with an elevated level of trust, and get more and more people to click on that link and become compromised and move laterally within the organization to establish that firm foothold and do what it is they intend to do. And that might not be just from an email perspective, it might be to look inside various corporate assets or steal information or redirect money. So the compromise can certainly spread way beyond just the initial Office 365 compromise.
And this leads on to why you would consider to use Okta with Proofpoint. So by introducing both those solutions, you may already be an Okta customer, you may already be a Proofpoint customer. By having both together, you are ultimately getting that stronger solution that will enhance your security around your users, in particular the identity aspects as well. So if we actually have a look here where Okta and Proofpoint fit in, of course, if we take a look at how they work, they complement each other. Given the number of credential email-based attacks, as Ed mentioned earlier, it's clear that identity and email security are so adjacent. And when we look at the best-of-breed technology out there, Okta and Proofpoint are the leading providers of identity and email security, respectively. Together, we can provide that best-in-class security for Office 365 and much better than other solutions can out there individually. And then when we take a look at this from an enterprise focus, Okta and Proofpoint are enterprise solutions. We're already deployed at thousands of leading and the largest organizations globally. So therefore, we've already demonstrated how we can work together to provide that ultimate solution to protect you and your users and their identities within your organization. So let's actually take a little look deeper at how we can actually work here. So again, I'm going to pass back over to Ed, and he's going to give us a little bit further detail on how Proofpoint works.
Thank you very much, James. The first use case is looking at prevention strategies. We reduce that window vulnerability wherever we can. And the first approach here, imagine you've bought into our zero trust vision. You're looking to actively protect your users from exposure. We're going to be looking first of all at the notion of VAPs, very attacked people. Now, anyone who's heard Proofpoint talk over the last couple of years will be familiar with the concept of a VAP. But for those of you that are not. I will go into that now. It is very distinct to a VIP. The way that we work with Okta is that we will identify this list of very attacked people or persons. That list will then get exported automatically into Okta as a group. We can then apply adaptive security controls or adaptive security policies from within Okta, and those security policies are then applied at a user level. So let's have a look a little bit more into what a VAP is. VAPs are your users who are either vulnerable, more widely attacked, or more privileged, or a combination of all of those 3 points than others. So in terms of vulnerable, these are people who are more likely to click on a link. They're your clickers. They're the people who haven't done their security awareness training, who who don't really, or possibly don't work with computers that much. People who aren't aware. They're the people who don't think twice about clicking on something and exhibit risky behavior. Then you've got the people who are more widely attacked. These are people that criminal gangs may have targeted and gone, you know what, that person looks like they may be able to give us access to a bit of information that we would really like. And they're potentially going to be sent really highly targeted, possibly very sophisticated, or even simple but high volumes of attacks. And then you've got people who are privileged. These are people who have access to critical information, sensitive information, personal information, or who could be used for as a pivot point to perform a sort of a lateral movement within an organization to get to someone who does have that privilege. And when you combine all three of those attributes, you'll end up with a VAP, a very attacked person, someone who the criminals have identified as being a prime target. If we could move on to the next slide, please. And we'll show these in Proofpoint. You'll see this in the demo in a moment, that we'll have a list of very attacked people, the type of threats that are targeting them, and an overall sort of attack volume. We use an attack index. It's quite an interesting concept. Of course, it looks at how many, of course, the attack index looks at sort of how many messages, malicious messages a user is receiving. But really, it's far more complex and detailed than that. We use an algorithm to understand the threat that's intended by that particular message, how sophisticated it is, how widespread and focused that attack or campaign is, the type of attack. So we'll take into account a number of attributes before assigning a threat index score to a particular email or attack campaign, and then look at that in terms of the overall number of malicious messages users are receiving, and use that to build out a profile of these very attacked people. And you can see at the top there, we've got one user who's got a much, much higher VAP score than everybody else, and you could consider them as being a #1 target for the criminal gangs. But let's have a look at that in a quick demo. Here we're going to look at the Proofpoint Targeted Attack Protection dashboard, and the first part we'll look at is just a list of the types of threats. We can sort that out by dates, and we can see the different types of threats. You can look at phishing, imposter, malware. We're just going to look at all of them as part of this demo. We've got a phishing attack that's active using Google Drive. We've got a keylogger, a bit of malware there that someone might install if they double click on the link. Another phishing campaign there. Office 365, something very relevant to the conversation today. We can drill down into that and see much more information, who it's been sent to. In this case, all the messages as part of this campaign were blocked. We can see why it was condemned. It's been condemned by multiple sources across the various Proofpoint detection points. It's been reported to us by an end user. It's been analyzed by the sandbox, and we can see who it's been sent to. We can also look at some reporting information to see the threat landscape report, the different types of threats that are coming into your organization, how you're being attacked, phishing, by malware, the different campaigns, the threat actors that are sending messages to you. So you get a really good idea of the profile of the sorts of threats that are coming into you as an organization. Interestingly, as I mentioned earlier, we'll see they're often using legitimate sites to perpetrate their phishing messages. OneDrive there, Google, and also for the domains that are being used to send these messages. Gmail's always a popular one with the criminal gangs. If I wanted to focus in on OneDrive, I could just do a search for the threats in there, and you can see all of the threats that have come into the organization using OneDrive as a basis for the phishing message. A user will click on a link into a OneDrive campaign and give up their credentials. Moving back into the reporting side, I could look at my list of very attacked people. I'm going to focus here on Avery Walker, the office manager. She's had a lot of APT malware financial coming through to her. She's a VIP as well as a VAP, and she's going to be important when we come to look at the next stage of what happens and how we reduce the risk that that she faces. But overall, you can see that in this particular organization, there are 348 very attacked people who are on average attacked more than 3.54 times than the others. And to set up integration with Okta, it's extremely straightforward. Simply go into the settings part of the dashboard and choose to put in your API credentials for Okta. It's as simple as that. We've had people in meetings in the past go and do it within a couple of minutes, and they're up and running with that integration. Extremely straightforward. And of course, we'll be happy to help anybody get that set up, and the team at Bytes will as well, if you want post this meeting.
Thank you, Ed. So, since some really interesting stuff there with how we can detect these very attacked people within your organizations using that profiling on the risks that are associated with certain tasks that may have occurred. What we want to have a look at next is where Okta fits into this. How do we feed that information in? Ed showed at the very end there how that integration is very simple with that API connection into Okta. Well, I'll be taking you through over the next couple of slides, in particular the second one where we actually look at a demonstration of how they work together. You'll see how easy it is to take the information on these particular users, the ones that are stated as being very attacked people, and applying different policies to them. Now, Ed mentioned this in some detail earlier on in this session, whereby he mentioned there were a number of different security policies that could be applied to these users that are seen as potentially vulnerable or even labeled as very attacked people. Now, the different things that we can apply inside of Okta are listed on the left here. We can do things such as simple password policies, for instance. We can have more enhanced or even more secure password policies based on these users that we have specified and brought across from Proofpoint. You'll see in the center here on the screenshot that we've got a number of different groups available in my Okta tenant. One of the groups in particular is called Very Attacked People. Now we can attach this group and the memberships within it across to these different policies that we can see on the left. Now to run you through, and we'll see a few of these today, we're not going to be seeing a password policy that can be applied, but what we will be seeing is how we can enforce different user experiences. One in particular is the authentication policy. Now, I'm going to be taking you through a user in a second and the experience that they get as a normal user and then stated as a very attacked person. And this is Avery Harris. Now, Avery Harris is going to be given that seamless experience at the beginning using a password, and then all of a sudden Proofpoint's detected that she has been attacked or she's been labeled as a very attacked person. So therefore, we want to put a more secure policy around her accessing Okta in general, but also when she accesses some of these applications too. So you'll see a few of these different policies on the left here in the demonstration in a second. You'll also see how these have been put together on this slide, whereby we've got a number of different policies put in place around these different groups that we have provided. And on the right there is one of the rules that I've put together for when Avery actually accesses either an application or accesses Okta in general. So you'll see here we can specify a number of conditions and a number of rules, whereby it can be based on her location or even specifying that this person is a member of the very attacked people group inside of Okta, which has been fed in from Proofpoint. So let's actually have a look at how this comes together, and I'll take you through the end user experience that's presented to Avery. So before we begin, as I said before, there are a couple of things I'm going to be showing you in this video. The first thing I'm going to be showing you is how Avery Harris, keep getting the wrong name wrong now, Avery Harris keeps accessing her Okta dashboard to access the applications that she has a single sign-on experience into those applications. So show you just a basic authentication into the Okta platform. I'll then be showing you the administrator for my tenant. This will be my account, James.Richmond. I'll be looking at the policies that can be applied to these different users that are specified as a very attacked person, and showing you how we can protect your resources, whether it's the whole Okta tenant or even on an application by application basis. And then finally, you will see the outcome of the experience that Avery will experience once Proofpoint has fed that information into Okta and specified her as a very attacked person. So let's go and have a look at this. So as I said to you before, Avery Harris is going to simply authenticate into the Okta dashboard here. What we're looking at right now is the sign-on screen for this. So Avery Harris is going to sign in. Take note that she's just providing a password on this occasion. We're now going to be taken into the dashboard where Avery will be able to see all of her applications. You'll also see that I can access any of these applications. And if I click on Salesforce, I get that seamless experience using SAML into that particular application. So all looking very nice at the moment. However, if something was to be labeled inside of Proofpoint and she needs to be specified as a very attacked person, then we would want to change the experience for this particular user. So now, if I sign in with my administrator for my Okta tenant, which I said before is my account, so I manage this organization, we're going to take a look at how this information can be fed into Okta and how we can change that experience for these users that are highlighted as very attacked people. So again, facing the same experience of providing a username and a password, I will be taken to the Okta dashboard where you'll see I have a number of different applications assigned to me, all of which I can access at the moment. And I'm just going to go across into the administrator dashboard. On this occasion, I'm being prompted for MFA to protect our administration dashboard behind it. Now, if I go into the universal directory, I'm going to go to our groups first of all. Remember this screenshot earlier, all the different departments? I've also got a group here called very attacked people. Let's have a look at that. Now, what you'll see is that Avery Harris has now been labeled as a very attacked person. This information has been fed in from Proofpoint. She's been labeled as a very attacked person in Proofpoint based on activity in her email account. This was mentioned earlier around Office 365 as an example. And you'll see here now she's a member of this group inside of Okta. We can base a number of different policies around this information. And you'll see on the right there by rule. Now, if we have a look at Avery Harris's account, we'll see the applications that she has access to, a number of which being SAP, Workday, Office 365. And you'll also see, much like we saw the second ago, that she is a member of that very attacked people group. Now, on this occasion, Avery has now been labeled as a very attacked person. So the experience that she's going to receive is going to be significantly different on this occasion when she goes to authenticate. Remember before, it was simply a username and a password. Now, when Avery actually authenticates into Okta, she's not going to provide a password. Instead, we're going to enforce a far more secure policy for authenticating into our platform. And actually on this occasion, we're going completely passwordless. So the first thing she's going to be providing is a Touch ID. So we're going to use the biometrics for that, followed by a push notification via Okta Verify. And what you'll see here is combined, this is a far stronger policy to access her resources than just simply providing a password at the very beginning. Now, what you'll also see that is different on this dashboard right now is that we can't actually access a couple of these applications anymore. You'll see that there is a padlock next to SAP Concur Solutions and the payroll side of things. This is because we're not meeting the conditions required to be able to access these applications. And because SAP has been configured to use Okta as its identity provider, we cannot bypass these rules that have been enforced. If we go and access a different application in a second, such as Salesforce, you'll see that the experience here has also changed. Because Avery is now a very attacked person inside of Okta, it's not going to be just that seamless SSO experience into that application anymore without any further enhanced security. You'll see now that Avery is being prompted for another factor of authentication. In this case, I'm simply going to use my Okta Verify again. When I complete this push notification, I'll then be taken into that application as seamless as possible without even providing a password, but showing how we can enhance the security around these identities based on the information that Proofpoint has fed into Okta. Now, I'm not going to show any policies today as to how these are configured, but if there are any questions on what you have seen in this demonstration or would like further details on how this can be configured, please do give me a shout either at the end of the session or afterwards, and I'd be happy to take you through that. Now, you did see a few different things in that demonstration. We saw how we can enhance the security around applications and the Okta dashboard in general. But what you didn't see was the options that are available to our end users in that experience. The first thing I want to highlight here is that we're not enforcing certain factors for certain users. We can do that, of course, but we give choice to our end users. We have the ability to enforce different policies based on the factor authentication that an end user uses. So you'll see here, in terms of the security around the different factors that we provide, a password is what we see as the least secure approach. But the most secure approach would be using biometrics, a security key, or even using Okta Verify for that push notification. And this is how we can enforce or enhance the security around our resources in our organization based on the information that's been fed in from that Proofpoint solution. Now, when we look at this in more detail, of course, we need to look at how we can protect our organization further. How can we take this information that we are gathering from Proofpoint and build on this inside of Okta to protect our organization in the case of suspicious activity? Well, we do this by allowing our end users to report activity on their account that may have occurred without them knowing. One of these could be someone actually accessing the account from a different location. Okta has the ability to send email notifications to its end users to inform them of password changes or significant changes or differences in the authentication process that they've carried out on their account. You'll see here that sign-in details for this particular user have been different to the past, such as a new location or maybe using a new device. Therefore, we give the ability to the end user to report this activity inside of Okta to protect their account in the event of malicious activity. Now, there are other things here that we can provide around securing the account, but I do now want to pass back over to Ed, who's going to take you through a number of different response strategies, and we'll be actually taking a little bit closer look as to how Okta can help with those too.
Thanks, James, and great demo there. I really like the way that shows the impact of credential theft and a result of someone who's been successfully compromised as a result of a phishing attack. You know, it's not just access to the Office 365; it's access to all of those different apps that that someone might be using within their organization, and just shows how important this is. And that ties in nicely to this use case too, where we're looking at a response strategy where someone has been compromised, something has happened, something has got through. The first use case was prevention. Prevention, always great, but the notion of 100% protection, 100% security, sort of went away 10 or 15 years ago, and now we're looking at risk management and risk reduction and what to do in the event of a successful email coming through. If you could move on to the next slide, please. We talked earlier about the impact of phishing and the huge amount of money lost as a result of that. We also talked about the reduction in that cost to an individual organization that could be achieved as a result of automation. Remembering the average cost for a breach for an organization not using any automation was nearly $4.5 million. And for those who were using automation, that was reduced by more than $1.5 million to $2.88 million. So automation and reducing that time of exposure is significant when it comes to clearing up and reducing the overall cost of a compromise. Let's have a look at an example of how we will do that at Proofpoint. And James, feel free to chime in from the Okta side of things here as well. But first of all, we've got a user, and they're one of those clickers, one of those vulnerable people we talked about earlier, and they've clicked on a link. Okay, we will later on potentially, after some analysis, identify that that click has been made, and we will then remove as a response that message from that user's inbox. We will also remove that message using our threat response auto pull technology from any other message in the inbox, whether the user has forwarded it or if a different user has received another email with that same URL in it. We'll then add that information via our threat response auto pull tool. We will, sorry, not add that information. We'll be able to alert Okta, the Okta Identity Cloud, as an additional action to removing those messages from the users' inboxes, and then Okta will take over and do what James has just described.
So one thing I wanted to add there from what we demonstrated to you earlier is I actually only demonstrated how we can enhance the security around applications and accessing Okta in general, so only enhancing that security. What we also have the ability to do is actually feed in further information from Proofpoint. So say, for instance, we actually wanted to deny access to all resources for a particular user because their account had been so attacked and had received a profile rating much greater than anticipated within Proofpoint, we would have the ability to actually deny them access to applications. I showed it to some degree in the demonstration. We showed how SAP had a padlock next to it. That's because we didn't meet the conditions required to access them. That same thing could be applied for the access experience that I showed when I went to actually access Salesforce. So rather than being prompted for MFA, the user would be informed that they are unable to access that resource. Or it could even be the case that they cannot authenticate into Okta altogether because we're aiming to protect their identity while we investigate what has actually happened here so we can secure those resources. So that step 4 there doesn't necessarily have to be MFA. It could be the denial of access to those resources. The user could be informed of malicious activity, and then that investigation could begin.
And I just wanted to highlight another point that I should have mentioned a moment ago, that often when these links get into the user's inbox, people say, well, why aren't they detected in the first place? The criminal gangs use legitimate message templates, often from legitimate senders. You saw the Gmail example earlier. And at the time of delivery, when Proofpoint is scanning or analyzing those messages, that link is actually not malicious. The malicious code on the target website may not be active, or that target website may not be available at that time of delivery. So, this is a post-delivery remediation when a message that was legitimate at the time, or sorry, not legitimate, not malicious at time of delivery, but activated later on. One of the simple techniques that criminal gangs use to circumvent detection, and one of the reasons that we're here today talking about this.
Brilliant. Yeah. So that is what we've brought together today, just to show you how you can really utilize the power of both solutions in your organization, whether you're an existing Okta or whether you're an existing Proofpoint. You can see there the power that you can harness from either solutions by using one another to further protect your resources and even potentially make the user experience even more seamless than before, but enhance that security at the same time. So just opening up now to any questions that people may have on either solution, and we'll be happy to answer those for you.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Ed. Thank you, James, as well. So we have had a couple of questions that have come in. So the first one is, you mentioned Office 365 configured with default settings. Do you really need these solutions if you have safe links and safe attachments and 2FA enabled?
Can I jump in first, James?
You go for it, Ed.
Great thing. Yes, you do. And there's a number of reasons for that. The principal reason is that a lot of these phishing messages will get through the Office detection rates. Even with those slightly more advanced techniques, their messages are still getting through. And one of the reasons for that is that the criminal gangs are using the Office 365 infrastructure, and it often gets missed by Microsoft. The other thing is, we've talked a lot about that from a phishing perspective. That's not the only type of attack. That the criminals use multiple different techniques, and having a layered defense in depth, if you will reap you significant benefits. As I mentioned earlier on in the introduction, the criminal gangs are using Office 365's own technology as their test bed to make sure that they can circumvent it beforehand. And there are multiple techniques that they are using to avoid detection by Microsoft, which is that's their getting past that is their table stakes.
And I think from an Okta point of view, to add there, I don't want to go off course as to what the topic of conversation is today, but I would probably point towards more zero trust and those other applications that you integrate with on a day-to-day basis. It's probably very likely you don't just use Microsoft within your organization. So if you're looking to integrate with other best-of-breed applications out there, we have got an integration network consisting of over 7,500 integrations, providing the ability to do that lifecycle management into those applications, even at an advanced and deep granular level, and also the ability to open up to a number of other vendors for that zero trust strategy as well, whether that's MDM, EDR, and allowing you further control and protection over those resources you're using, and not necessarily just using the ability of what Microsoft provides. But I mean,
Excellent.
That's a whole other conversation right there.
Perhaps on another session. Thank you, James. James, again, this question is probably going to be directed at you, and it is, how does Okta obtain your user base, and what if we have multiple domains?
So you can import users from pretty much everywhere inside of Okta. Now, to keep it relevant to the multiple domains that you say you have in your organization, Okta actually supports an unlimited amount of domains via directory integrations. Now, when I say unlimited, literally it is unlimited. There is no ceiling for it that has been specified in our documentation, or as an organization. We have organizations connected to hundreds of Active Directories with the ability to have that information synchronized across into Okta. Now, as an organization, you may want to continue to use your AD credentials to access resources in your organization. Not a problem. You can authenticate into Okta using delegated authentication. So when you want to go and access your resources, you can continue as an end user to access things using your single set of AD credentials against Okta with that enhanced security through MFA. I think that was answering the question there, Christian. Was there a part at the beginning that I missed there at all?
No, James, that was spot on. Thank you very much.
Perfect.
Now, if anyone else in the audience does have any more questions, I would urge you to type them in now. If not, you are more than welcome to email your account manager or tell me more at bytes.co.uk, and one of us will be able to follow up. Now, before we do close off, it will be in everyone's best interest to understand a little bit about what we're doing internally at Bytes around, or on rather, the topic of vendor-to-vendor integration. So you'll have to forgive me, I believe I skipped over my introduction at the beginning, but my name is Christian Sullivan and I'm part of the identity team here at Bytes. And our projects over the coming months with our sales teams are discussing how security vendors are integrating with one another. So this will be the first webinar of many to come about how we can have two individual pieces of technology talking to each other to make your lives a little bit easier. We will have follow-up sessions on indeed Okta and its integration with CrowdStrike, as well as Okta's integration with Netscope, and of course Zscaler. So those are all on the roadmap. If there are any questions, please reach out to me directly or your account manager, and they can point you in my direction. We can have a conversation. Now, we haven't had any more questions come in, so I'd like to thank you all very much for your time today. I trust you found it useful, and like I said, please get in contact however you may choose, and we can pick up discussions from there. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.